Today one needs to become familiar with this other side of the Copernican worldview. Now that for centuries human souls have been conditioned through having the magnificent progress of the Copernican worldview placed before them again and again, the one side is as justified as the other. Today the one is deemed a sign of intelligence, though it is in fact a rather narrow-minded intelligence that holds up the Copernican worldview as the one true teaching. Whereas the other, that due to their Copernican worldview, human beings remain bound to the earth after death unless they acquire a spiritual conception, such as can be acquired within spiritual science today, is still considered foolishness and folly by people at present. Yet it is true. Nevertheless, what's true? The Copernican, the worldview before the Copernican worldview? Let's go back and look at that. The idea that the view of the physical structure of the world according to which the earth stands still and the sun moves around the earth's heavens, the stars move around the earth. In other words, the geocentric, that the earth is in the center of the universe. Yet it is true nevertheless. So what is he saying? That that's true instead of the Copernican worldview? As you know from the Bible, many think that is foolishness to human beings is wisdom for the gods. When human beings pass through the portal of death, they thereby alter the nature of their consciousness. It would be a completely false idea to believe that human beings lose consciousness after death. This peculiar idea is even prevalent among groups that call themselves theosophical. It is a nonsense, for on the contrary, consciousness becomes much more powerful, much more intense, but it is then of a different nature. Conscious ideas after death must be considered something else entirely, even when contrasted with our normal conceptions of the physical world. After death, the human being comes into contact with those people first and foremost with whom he is karmically linked during his life. In the spiritual world between death and a new birth, the deceased may encounter many human souls whom he penetrates, for the principle of penetrability rather than impenetrability applies there. Okay, let's say that again. For the principle of penetrability rather than impenetrability applies there. While those whom he passes by, if I can use that expression, are not present there for him. Those who are present there for him are those with whom he has a karmic connection. Through our life on earth, we need to grow into a general relationship between worlds, even after death. The founding of societies, established on purely spiritual grounds, that has already become a task for humanity of the present and of the future. Why does one seek to establish societies such as the Anthroposophical Society? Why does one seek to unite people in a sense under such ideas? Because a karmic bond is thereby established between human beings who are meant to find each other in the spiritual world. They are meant to be together in the spiritual world, which is something they could not do if they wandered around, cut off from one another here. By creating the opportunity for human beings to share and spread spiritual knowledge and wisdom, we achieve an enormous amount for life in the spiritual world. This then acts back on the physical sense world, which is constantly under the influence of the spiritual world. What occurs here are only the effects, the causes of which arise over there in the spiritual world, including while we live here on the physical plane. And you could say that if we merely consider what today are often run purely for propaganda purposes, associations are founded for everything possible, but truly very few are dedicated to spiritual matters, even if they are founded out of ever such great ambition or enthusiasm. Even if they are founded out of ever such great enthusiasm, through many an association, people think they are able to gradually transform the world into an earthly paradise. Well, prior to these 3 years of war, and I think he's referring to World War I here, maybe World War II, I'm actually not sure. Well, prior to these 3 years of war, there were numerous such associations founded on earth, in which the people worked towards gradually turning Europe into a social paradise. What exists now does not lend much credence to the belief that events will take their course according to how one thinks one is able to direct them. On the other hand, however, collaboration of the physical world with the spiritual world is even more complicated. Nevertheless, it must be said that if associations are founded in the light of spiritual science, People are working not only with the world of effects, but also with the world of causes, which lies behind the sensory effects. One needs to permeate oneself with this feeling if one wishes to understand correctly the infinitely deep significance of what is being achieved at present through living together in spiritual collaboration and what will be achieved in this respect in the future of humanity. This is not something that can arise out of any mere clubby association, but a sacred task which was destined for humanity of the present and of the future by the heavenly spiritual beings who guide the world. For human beings will have to acquire certain ideas about the supersensible world, as ever fewer supersensible ideas will come from the sense world. You could say that supersensible ideas are increasingly being driven out due to the continued progress of natural science. And by that he means empirical science, the science they teach us in school. Human beings would therefore gradually exclude themselves entirely from the spiritual world if they did not acquire any supersensible spiritual concepts. They would condemn themselves after death to uniting entirely with what is merely the physical earth, and also to uniting themselves with what the physical earth is destined to become. But the physical earth will become a corpse in future, and human beings as souls would be faced with the terrible prospect of condemning themselves to inhabiting a future corpse unless they decide to familiarize themselves with the spiritual world and put down roots in the spiritual world. The pursuit of spiritual science has therefore been set as a serious and profound task. That is something we must call before our souls as a sacred thought, once every day as it were, so that we never lose our zeal for the justified endeavor of spiritual science. If we take part in everything that comes toward us as concepts, all the many concepts that have already entered our spiritual stream from the spiritual world, then these conceptions can be expanded further and further. They enable us to free ourselves from our bondage to the earthly realm and to what is destructive in the earthly realm, so that we can act from out of other perspectives. We still remain united with the souls that we have left behind on earth and with whom we are karmically connected, as well as with the earth itself, but we are united with them from out of other regions. Indeed, we are even more intensively connected with the souls we have left behind on earth if we unite with them in a sense from out of higher regions, provided, that is, we are not condemned through having lived a purely materialistic life to haunt the earth, so to speak, where we cannot remain united through love with anything on earth, but instead can only really act as centers of destruction. You see, here we gradually develop our consciousness from childhood onwards. Well, we know how this consciousness grows and matures and need not say anything more. After death, entirely other processes prevail under which we must gradually acquire the consciousness that is required for life between death and a new birth. The way we go about our lives on earth, having experiences and learning things, that is not how it is after death. It is then no longer really necessary. What is necessary is that we detach ourselves from the extreme intensity of attachment that remains with us when we have departed our physical body. By passing through the portal of death and into a relationship with the spiritual world, we grow together with the same spiritual world that we describe here through spiritual science. We describe it as the world of the higher hierarchies: angeloi, archangeloi, archai, exousiai, dynamis, kuriotes, and so on, as the world of the higher hierarchies and as the deeds and experiences of these hierarchies. Here the world is outside of us. We are surrounded by the mineral realm, the plant realm, the animal realm. When we have passed through the portal of death, the spiritual beings that we count among the higher hierarchies are there in us. Indeed, their worlds are there in us. We are united with them. It is just that initially we are not able to distinguish ourselves from them. We live within them and they permeate us. Admittedly, this is a difficult concept, but it is one that needs to be grasped. Here, we are outside of the world. There, we are inside the world. Our being spreads itself over the whole world, yet we are unable to separate out and recognize ourselves. After death, we are filled completely, so to speak, with the being of the higher hierarchies and with what these hierarchies do. What is required is that we first separate out the next hierarchies that permeate us, the hierarchies of the angeloi, archangeloi, and archai from the higher hierarchies. Over there, we do not attain a proper I consciousness at all. I've already described the gradual maturing of the I consciousness in other lecture cycles and talks. If we are unable to find the power within us to distinguish what in us is angeloi, what in us is Elohim, what in us is a being from the hierarchy of the angeloi, what in us is a being from the hierarchy of the exousiai, the spirits of form. Over there, we need to learn to distinguish. We need to have the power to detach ourselves from that which we are united and from what it is that we wish to identify. Otherwise, it is in us and not external to us. Here, we must come together with what is outside of us and observe it, while over there we need to detach ourselves in order that we can be united with it. You see how, everything goes inside out. It's backwards, forwards, and reverse. Looking at it one way, then looking at it another. It is a lot to wrap your mind around. Given the way the world is at the current stage of humanity's evolution, we can only detach ourselves from what is otherwise asleep in us by acquiring spiritual concepts. These spiritual concepts that are so uncomfortable for human beings here because they have to exert themselves a little, exert themselves more than is the case with ordinary concepts. If we acquire spiritual concepts, then after death they develop into an enormous force through which we are able to recognize the spiritual world and comprehend it. This is very important. Today, human beings find the acquisition of spiritual concepts uncomfortable. They prefer to go to presentations where they are shown all kinds of photographs and whatever else exists of that sort, so that as far as possible they need not think beyond the sense realm. They only have to look at everything, or at any rate, they only like to go to lectures where they're told about things that they have in front of their eyes all the time anyway. Human beings today avoid expending the effort required to lift oneself up to such concepts, which are more difficult to grasp here because they do not have an external object. Their objects are the facts they refer to in the supersensible world, but over there, these concepts are the powers that show us the world as it is in reality. Got that? Thus we acquire the wisdom that we need through spiritual ideas and concepts in order to have a light over there. Otherwise, everything remains dark. What is acquired as wisdom here is light over there, spiritual light. Wisdom is spiritual light. Indeed, over there we need wisdom in order for it not to be dark. If we do not acquire any spiritual concepts, then that is simply the best means for ensuring that we do not have any light when we get over there. And without light, we move away from the sphere that we should be illuminating to arrive back on earth, where we wander around as the dead, as sinners of destruction on earth. At most, one can then only be used now and again by a black magician in order to provide inspiration for very special deeds and destructive works on earth. Are you getting this? Wisdom is therefore required so that one has light after death. But after death, we need something else as well. In addition to the ability to separate ourselves from and distinguish the beings of the spiritual world after death, we also need the capacity for love. Love. In addition to the ability to separate ourselves from and distinguish the beings of the spiritual world, after death, we also need the capacity for love. Ooh. Otherwise, we would not be able to develop the correct kind of relationship with the beings whom we are able to see through wisdom. We need love, but love that is developed here on earth is largely dependent on the physical body. It is a feeling. Feelings. Whoa, feelings. It is a feeling which here in the physical world is dependent on the rhythm of the breathing. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Feeling. Nothing more than feelings. Trying to forget all the pain and sacrifice in our lives. Feelings. Whoa, feelings. Whoa, feelings of the new day. Feelings. Nothing more than feelings. Trying to forget all the pain that is our life. We need love, but love that is developed here on earth is largely dependent on the physical body. It is a feeling, which here in the physical world is dependent on the rhythm of breathing. We cannot take this love over there with us to the spiritual world. At the present time, in particular, it would be a complete illusion to believe that we can take the love that we develop here over into the spiritual world. We do, however, take over into the spiritual world all the power of the love that we acquire here in the physical world through our sense-bound perspective through life with our physical being. Love is kindled by what is developed here in the physical world as understanding and appreciation for this physical world. The experiences that develop into love over there are precisely the experiences gained through the worldview of modern natural science, provided one has these experiences as feelings. However, love is something that can be of a lower or higher nature, depending on the domain in which it unfolds. If you pass through the portal of death and remain a center of destruction in the earthly realm, then you will also have developed much love. For the fact that you remain on earth is precisely a consequence of your having united yourself with purely naturalistic concepts. However, you will use this love for works of destruction, which you will then come to love. And you will be condemned to observe yourself in your love of this destructive work. Wrap your mind around that, huh? Wrap your mind around that. Okay, so if you're here in the world and you love your wife, you love your grandmother or something like that. That's good because it brings about a type of understanding that can be used in the next life, in life between death and a rebirth. But that's only if you embrace spiritual scientific concepts. If you embrace naturalistic science concepts or empirical science concepts, then when you try to revel in your love, your feelings, once you get over there to the other side, it turns into destructive work, which you in turn love. You become a center of destruction and you love it. I mean, what is that? That sounds like a damn demon. Until you're forced to observe yourself loving this destructive work, and I'm sure you're ashamed of it, and you just have to live through that shame until you just burn it all off of you. You see how this works? I bet you didn't know that, huh? Love becomes something noble, on the other hand, if human beings can rise up into the higher worlds and love what they have mastered through spiritual concepts. Let us not forget, love is something that is base. if it acts within a lower sphere, and something noble, lofty, and spiritual if it acts within a higher or spiritual sphere. That is the essence of what matters. If we do not become conscious of this, then we will not understand things in the right way. It is concepts such as these concerning the life of the human being after death that individuals need to acquire for themselves today. It is no longer enough for present-day humanity, and certainly will not be enough for humanity in the near future, that preachers tell people they should believe in this or that, or that they should prepare themselves for eternal life, if they are never able to tell people what the world actually looks like that human beings enter after they have passed through the portal of death. The stupid preachers. In earlier times, it was still possible to do this because natural scientific or naturalistic concepts did not yet exist, and because human beings had not yet been infected by mere material interests, which have gradually taken hold of everything since the 16th century. In earlier times, it was possible to talk to people about the supersensual world in the way that religious faiths still wish to do today. Today, that is no longer effective, as human beings frequently entrap themselves, unfortunately, it must be said, out of deep compassion for humanity, precisely because they wish to promote their own eternal bliss in an egotistical manner through their religious creeds. Can you believe that? All these Bible-beating motherfuckers. They goddamn gung-ho Christians, huh? They're basically sending themselves straight to hell. That's what I'm getting out of this. Right? This is esoteric. This is Christian mysticism. This is a guy who actually understands what the fuck's going on with the Bible and all that shit. For real. You know, all this fervor in your heart and you're just on fire for Jesus. You heard about that, being on fire for Jesus? You're a fucking idiot. Alright? You're a fucking idiot. That's emotion. Worthless emotion that's booby-trapping you. Today, that is no longer effective. As human beings frequently entrap themselves, unfortunately, it must be said, out of deep compassion for humanity, precisely because they wish to promote their own eternal bliss in an egotistical manner through religious creeds. They thereby entrap themselves more than ever in the physical sense realm in the naturalistic world, and block their own descendants after they have gone through the portal of death. Wow. Look what's happening to those people because of this belief in naturalistic science as opposed to spiritual science, and then also this pumped up Christian feelings. I mean, do you think that's an accident? Like that people are sent to hell by praising Jesus, basically? I mean, certainly that's an accident, right? I mean, are you starting to understand? Are you starting to read between the lines? Your Sunday school teacher don't know shit. He don't know God, he don't know Jesus. Alright? Damn people try to talk down to you like my mom. Oh, we know Jesus. Oh, we're closer to Jesus than you are. Come on, man. Get off the gas, huh? That's some weak fucking shit. Fucking weak minds. Realize when you're surrounded by weak minds, like when you go to church, yeah, you're surrounded by weakness. Hey, I'm just being real with you. Huh? I'm not, discounting God or Jesus or any of that shit. I'm just being fucking real, man. Go thump your Bible, all right? They then experience something else entirely, which makes it a necessity to stress quite strongly that spiritual science must be pursued by humanity now and in the future, because it must be noted, those people who are unable to furnish themselves with any conceptions of life after death through spiritual science find themselves in a deplorable situation. What? You mean we went and kissed his ass for decades and now we find ourselves in a deplorable position? While this quote-unquote so-called Satanist over here is really acquiring the kingdom of heaven, i.e. me. Wow, we got fucked, did we? No, you fucked yourself, motherfucker. Wake the fuck up, huh? You goddamn on fire. Give me a fucking break. Spiritual science is equally something that one must seek to spread among other human beings out of heartfelt concern, for the situation is wretched if people resist, and in their lack of understanding continue to resist the emergence of spiritual scientific ideas.